Twitch. Hey Twitch. Hey Twitch. Hey Twitch, how you doing? So yeah, I'm back this week and I've got actually a game plan for a change. So yeah, what I've got planned for today is I'm adding tests, which I didn't really have for my initial live views on the sign up, login, and that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm working on today. Is I'm gonna start adding tests. I think I may have started started kind of refactoring those live views, consolidating. I'm going to be consolidating them into a single live view with this update, and I'm actually doing test-driven development on this piece. So it does help that I've already done the work on sign up and login, so I have a better understanding of how WebAuthn will work. And for the next couple of hours, I'm going to be writing tests as I kind of move code around and consolidate those two separate live views into one. Also, I've made a couple changes here, very slight changes, but I've just kind of shifted things around a little bit so that so I can keep the lights off and to get take advantage of this natural light that's coming in. And aside from that, I just broke out my mechanical keyboard, so you're going to hear me typing more than usual. I figured that will fill the gaps where I'm like just really thinking hard and not speaking so much. So with that out of the way, was there anything else I wanted to talk on? So part of what's helping me understand how to test live views is I pulled the trigger last night and bought this course, Testing Live View, from Herman Velasco. So you can find this at testingliveview.com. I'd say the price is worth it. Definitely take a look at the list of videos and topics that'll be covered. If you want to get an idea of how he kind of walks through a particular tutorial testing forms, this one you can watch for free. It's 11 minutes long. Highly recommend this. A lot of good feedback from people in the community as well. So this is what I'm using to kind of guide my tests. Also, a documentation from the LiveViewTest module in Phoenix LiveView. And then what I'm working on here is I've created a new Connect live view. So instead of having a separate live view for sign up or log in, I think really these can kind of live, since I'm using WebAuthn, these can actually live within the same live view. And because this is an application that is geared towards collaboration and music and kind of electronic music, I think the term connect makes a lot of sense here. So that's why I'm changing things up a little bit here. So the nav bar will be changed once this live view is finished. And yeah, so let's take a look at what I've got so far. I'm working on a new branch. The acceptance criteria that I've created for this live view is, well, first of all, with the user story, as an unauthenticated user, I want to see the Connect live view so that I may register or log in. Excuse me. So first of all, it must render the userconnect.index live view. That's already tested. It must render a form. I've already got that tested as well. It must render a username input. And also it must render register and login buttons. So what I did last night was kind of gearing up for this live stream today. And yeah, so I've got... this is where I started. So I have a live view our live test here. So this is for user connect live. And this is the test module. So it uses the con case that's predefined by Phoenix. I'm importing the LiveViewTest module as well. I've got an endpoint module attribute, and I've got a couple more attributes that I've added. So I've got a path, because that's going to be used throughout a lot of different tests. So this is the path for the Connect Live View. And then I've got the page title as well. So put that in the module attribute just so it could be checked in multiple places. Other than that, so I've got my first test. Well, first of all, I'm wrapping. My first tests are all geared towards the unauthenticated user. First of all, we want to make sure you can see the page. So this first test just asserts that you can navigate to this path and that you do get a view in HTML. The module is the module that I expected it to be. The page title has been set to connect with the key emoji. The page title shows up somewhere within the HTML, both for the disconnected HTML and also for the rendered live view HTML. If you want to understand the difference between the disconnected and view HTML here, the LiveViewTest module will have some information, but also this course does a pretty good job of explaining that as well. So all we're doing here is we're just checking to make sure page title is somewhere within the HTML for these two different views and within the page title itself. So what this actually looks like is so I don't know how I can show this here, but the page title, I've updated the root layout. I think I need to customize my my keyboard. My control and other keys are not what I expected to be. Okay, so if I get too confused about that, I may just swap keyboards again. Anyway, so I think I can go to root. So I will, if a page title has been assigned, I will join that to the suffix of LiveShowy. So like the connect live view is going to look like this, connect with a key that has a pipe to LiveShowy. So this is something I kind of neglected before, so I wasn't really setting page titles. And so you would, if you were navigating through a bunch of different pages or backwards and forwards, you wouldn't really be able to see from here, from your history, like which page, like which piece of history is going to lead to a particular page. So now that I'm doing these tests up front, that's going to help me enforce that on myself. The next thing I'm asserting is that the unauthenticated user can see the connect form. So if you go to this path, you should see an element. So this is a CSS selector. It looks for a form element with an ID of connect-form. And then it also checks to make sure that we have a username input. We have a register, or we have a button that has a Phoenix click handler for register and for login. And then the next test is we see an alert when the username is too short. So there's actually validation. So the first thing that happens whenever the live view mounts is it renders a change set with empty attributes. This is a schemaless change set within the live view module itself. And so that's really handy. And it takes takes the kind of an empty map as a struct in this case, and the only field here is the username, so that's just a string. So we're casting that here, validating that the username is required, and then on top of that, whenever there's an actual change on the form, like if you press a key or add a character to the input, it will trigger a change event here on the form. and it will also actually reach out. So it will spin up this schemaless change set, and it will also use the validate username helper from the user module. So what does that look like? So validate username is right here. It takes a change set, validates that username is required, and validates the length is minimum of 3 and maximum of 80. Of course, that could change in the future, but those are the rules that I've put in place so far. So there's a little bit of duplication where it's validating username is required twice. I could probably, just while I'm here, I could probably go ahead and remove that one. So yeah, and these tests, I believe, are passing. So let's see. Yep, we do not have a passing test. So we're missing, okay, what do I do with the button here? All right, so I did change the click, like the event names that I want to use, because I need to be a little bit more granular. There's actually a process here that happens with WebAuthn. So whenever you click register or login, it doesn't just send you willy-nilly into the application. It's got to generate, the server needs to generate a challenge that the application will use to register a new authentication method. That could be a USB key or, biometric ID, whatever your operating system supports. And then once you do that on the client, it will send back an attestation to the server. So I need these events to be pretty granular and specific to what's being done here. So whenever you click this button, it's going to create a challenge for registration. And whenever you click the login button, it's going to generate a challenge for login. So that's fine. I just need to update these two. Yep, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and change my keyboard settings here because I need to swap my control and like primary key. Okay, so let's see, control. I think I need to swap control and command. Let's try that. Sweet, okay. I've got the same keyboard that I use for the work computer, and I've kind of adapted to where the keys are for that. This is it's actually a Windows keyboard, so kind of got to override the defaults there. By the way, just quick aside, I do have a moon lander. I really did try. Well, no, wait. I really did not try. I did not try. I set aside maybe an hour or two trying to kind of piece things together. I did start to kind of get a hang for where regular keys were, but I think the unlabeled keys really made it difficult for me to work with that. Plus, like I'm trying to make progress on this application, and I do that. Like if I'm sitting at the computer, like my priority right now is just to get this application up and running in a way that I can kind of test out the core ideas about playing music across regions. Adapting to a new keyboard is not quite a piece of that. So Moonlander, maybe I'll come back to you someday. But in the meantime, it looks cool. But yeah, I need to like maybe take a vacation, just spend a few days not being productive and like doing typing lessons just so I can kind of get the hang of it. It does seem like it would be really cool. Anyway, let's see here. It's either that or I return it. So now I've got the click handlers updated. So let's make sure the tests are passing. Very good. All right, so let's see. So the way I've been approaching this is truly driving development through tests. So before I add any features or code to the module or to the HTML template, I've got to write a test first. And that's really cool because it helps me kind of think through what I really need and what's important about what I'm trying to accomplish in the moment. And also long term, it's going to give me more confidence that as I'm making changes to the application, or as other people might start making changes to the application, that it can be deployed, updates can be released with confidence. So yeah, but yeah. So let's take a look at the next thing here. Looking back at the list, so it renders these buttons. It renders a username input. It does render username change set errors, so I can go ahead and check that. Okay, so now I guess what I'm working on next is the registration challenge. Okay, so I think this test here was kind of getting a little bit ahead of itself. Let me uncomment this. So I think what this test really needs to do, I don't think I'm going to wrap. Let's think about the registration process. So what happens is you type in a username, you're going to click register, and it's going to, let me write this down because that will be clearer, I think. All right, so the sequence of events is enter username. We're going to click the register button. Then we're going to check username uniqueness. Then we're going to create a challenge. This is assuming that I think I'm going to say assert uniqueness. So if the username is not unique, it will fail. And it would only create the challenge if you have a unique username. So then once you create the challenge, the browser, and this is where it gets tricky for testing. I may have to DIY some of this. Or maybe look back at the Wax documentation and maybe get like a fake. I'm gonna have to like generate a fake public key that can be used here. That's going to take a little bit of studying. So anyway, so we create the challenge, and the browser, or let me say the JS hook, presents WebAuthn options. Or do we call it WebAuthn? I'll worry about clarifying this later. Then user, so then you select security key type. Then you activate, I guess is the word to use here. Then you activate the selected key. So it could be a USB key, Face ID, Touch ID, whatever. Activate selected key. Then the browser, or let's say the JS hook, just to be consistent, sends attestation to server. This is a server. Let's say digests attestation. And finally, I think this is the last step. Server registers user. I guess I need to add a step here for like alerting and redirecting. Confirmation alert is rendered, and user is redirected to, I'll say settings for now. So there's like a settings live view. Okay, that's a lot of steps, right? So, and that doesn't even include like just getting to the page. But once you're on the page, you'll enter the username, click register button. The server will assert the username is unique. If that succeeds, it will go to creating a challenge. The JavaScript hook will present WebAuthn options. So conflating a couple steps here, or skipping a couple details, but so you'll select your security key type, activate the selected key, send the attestation back to the server, which digests the attestation, registers the user. If it's successful, it will render an alert, I guess, for success or error. And if it's successful, it will redirect the user to the settings page for their new account. Okay. So that kind of tells me what needs to be done within this test. I think I'm kind of on the fence about whether do I test like the challenge separately from the attestation, or does this entire flow need to be inside of one test? We will figure this out as we go. I think I'll start with one big test and then see if maybe it can be broken down. My shortcuts are still not quite where I... How do I move this? Aha, okay. All right, so that's the sequence of events once we're in this live view. Fortunately, with Elixir, we can kind of write this as a big pipeline of functions. What's going to be tricky, like I said, is actually like I don't think there's anything kind of pre-built in the Elixir or Phoenix ecosystem for like generating like a fake security key. That's going to be the part where like the rubber meets the road. That's why I've kind of procrastinated on testing this, because I wasn't really sure how to do that. But I think at the end of the day, if I remember correctly, we'll see about whenever we check the docs. But I think like a lot of these are basically just maps with random data that are passed around from the from the client as objects back to the server as maps. So seems doable. Let's go into, let's just start writing some code. So I think I'm going to go ahead and strip out, remove this. I'm going to make this a variable. Okay. Just moving all this up into variables so the pipeline can look decent. So we're going to start with a view. We're going to pipe that in here. We're going to remove this view here. I think we're going to, do you remember Herman saying something about you want to make sure that you're checking for the form? By the way, I think I'm going to make that a module attribute here in a moment because it's going to be used so frequently. Let's do that now. So form selector. Lost it. Okay, so I'm going to copy that again. Okay, then now I can grab, well, I can't just do find or replace here because a couple of those are going to be interpolated. But I can do, no, I can't even do that. Okay, so form selector. Then down here, I'm going to do form selector. Now, and these three, there we go. Sweet. So now if I decide to rename that forms ID, I've got one place to change it instead of who knows how many we'll have by the time this is done. Probably dozens. Okay, so we've got a username, we've got a user params, we've got the view, we're finding the form. We're going to render a submit. So render submit is this function right here. Actually, we're going to take the one with 3 arguments. So arity of 3. So this version takes the view. You tell it which event you want to be triggering. Of course, I think you can do this as a, well, obviously you can do, the docs have it as an atom. I'm going to use a string here because that's what I use in the that LiveViews is typically a string. So I don't have that handler yet, but that's the event that it's going to expect. And then User params is going to be a map of the data that I want to pass in. And so this is structured to match the way that the form is built. So since we're using a schemaless change set, we have to use this as attribute. So all this data gets wrapped inside of a user key. So it's a map within a map. It's just one field, but it still has to be stored that way for Phoenix LiveView. Oh, and by the way, just while I'm here, so for the change handler, basically anytime you're changing the field, the username's value, typing or pasting or whatever, it's going to trigger changes. It's going to validate that the username is the correct length. And then if you were to hit enter, and I may change my mind on this, but I think the default action could be login. I think that'll make sense. And then if it says your username's already taken because you wanted to, anyway, yeah, I think hitting enter should just default to login instead of register. I may just have no default action. Well, I'll take that back. If I had no default action, the page would refresh. So it would go through the flash of refreshing and reestablishing the WebSocket, because at that point it would have no events to listen to. So it would just treat the form as a regular form, if I remember correctly. And then, yeah, that's not what I want. So we're going to enter the username. Click the register button. This is kind of a way of wrapping some of these steps in one. So this will enter the username and send it an event called challenge register. Okay, so let's just see what happens with this test. I'm only going to run this test and not the full suite, and not all the tests in this file. All right. Oh, maybe this doesn't need to be a submit. Maybe it needs to be change. All right, so we're seeing the same error. No function clause matching render event. Change. Okay, maybe I need to move user params here. And then do render click. Render click, and then this is a little bit unusual because I'm using one form and it's not really being submitted, at least not for registration. Let's take a look at this form for a minute. Let's see. So it takes returns a form element to scope a function to. Is value required? I think this is exactly what I started with. Wait, maybe I don't need the form selector. Okay. Let's see what happens. So right now I've got this kind of catch-all handle event just to kind of log anytime a unspecified event is handled. Okay. Right, okay, so now I need to add this handler. So this has a user map with the username and a socket. By the way, I did initially have an email field, and I think I'm going to make email a separate concern. So you're going to be able to sign up for an account with just a username, as long as the username is not already taken. And that will generate, like, it will ask you to register a security key or, biometric ID. And then I think from there, once it gets you into the settings page, if you do not have an email, it will have a banner that says, please enter an email address in case customer service needs blah, 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 whatever. So I think I should have already made the email optional from the regular chain set. Yeah, so email I think is going to be optional initially. Okay. So now that test should pass technically because the event is being handled. Sure enough. Okay. So now how do we assert, or like what should I assert? Ooh, this is tricky. So this is where probably gonna have to look at the tutorial about JavaScript hooks. Yeah, let's take a look at that. I don't see anything about JavaScript hooks in the docs. I'm not sure how it would be. Not really sure if that's supposed to be shared, so I'm going to move that over to the side. I'm not trying to share stuff that's behind a paywall. Okay, but if I can figure this out, that might be helpful. So a render hook. Okay. Ah, there it is. Okay, so there's a render hook helper. What's going to be tricky is like whenever the server generates the challenge and presents that to the client, it doesn't put an element on the page. It's like, I don't know if it's technically shadowed on, but it's like kind of like a dialog or an alert from the browser itself. And it shows up to ask you whether you want to use your Android device, a USB key, or this device. I'm not sure if I'll be able to test against that, or if I'll be able to even, I may need to like mock that with a fake. Yeah, that's gonna be tricky. Okay, so let's take a look at render hook first. So it sends a hook event to the view or an element and returns the rendered result. It returns the contents of the whole live view or an error redirect tuple. All right, so I need to, part of this is I'm refreshing my memory about how the authentication works with oh yeah. Yeah, so I do have part of the JavaScript hook I built was detecting whether WebAuthn is supported, and if it's not, it puts a flash message, because like this is going to be required to sign up for an account. And then if you're on a browser that just doesn't support it, I'm going to have to say sorry. I think I have to put a hook on the form itself. That actually goes in as an option. I'm going to go ahead and wrap these onto new lines. Okay, that's a little bit cleaner. Oh, that's supposed to be 4. Okay, so now I've got the Phoenix hook there. I've got ID. Okay. It doesn't feel like 45 minutes has gone by. I don't know if you can tell I've got more energy this week than I had the week before, maybe even a couple of weeks ago. Couple days of rest will help with that, right? Also, it's my birthday. Okay, so let's see. So I've got my Phoenix hook there. I'm gonna go ahead and copy this again just to make sure. Let's see, this is gonna be render hook, I think. If you are pushing events from a hook to a component, then you must pass an element. Did I have a Phoenix target here? Okay, I think render hook would be like sending, it's kind of like faking a message from the browser back to the server. So I think I will use that after a step or two. So render submit, like how do I test what should be happening inside of here? First of all, let's see what should be happening. So we're going to look at, I do want to add a note to myself to deal with WebAuthn supported. Should make that a note here. TBD. Okay. So back to the challenge. You know, one thing I've picked up from Herman's tutorials is I may be doing, so I may be doing too much pattern matching in the function heads, especially for cases where we have multiple pieces of data or like long function names. Like once you add too many characters, it has to wrap the line, right? Like the mixed formatter will do that for you. But then it makes it kind of difficult to collapse because then you've got two different things that could be collapsed. So I think instead of putting like assigns inside of the function head, I'm going to start grabbing those inside of the function body. And I think I'm going to do the same thing with params here. This is just going to clean up the code, I think. So that accomplishes the same thing. Very good. And now we've got a much tighter function head. And like if I collapsed all these down, I could still tell. Like it'd be easy to kind of skim through and find a function when I need it. Okay, so now we've got, oh yeah, so I'm going to grab the, I won't really need the change set. Maybe I will. So the question is like, do I get the username from the params or from the change set? So the change set will tell me if there's errors. I guess all I really need to do is just check for errors in the change set. And then I can use the username from the params. So let's see, change set. And then okay, so we're going to generate a new Wax registration challenge. Which I think is going to go into a new function. And I think, as I'm thinking about this, I think this is going to turn into a with statement. Okay, so and then options, we're going to be attestation none. There we go. Origin. I need to add a function called getOrigin from the socket. So I guess I will need the socket here as well. And then I will do rpid auto, which that may be the default. Let's take a look. I'm not sure what the default is. I know this is working, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep using the same options that I did before. So I don't actually need a username for the registration challenge, because that's going to be, that's not really a concern here. But I do need this getOrigin function, so I'm going to go ahead and find it wherever it is. Is that imported? Oh, it must be from the live view. From view helpers. Right, okay. Okay, so I don't need to create that locally. I do need, so previously I've been putting the challenge into the process memory. It works. I think within LiveView, it may like be more, it feels like an anti-pattern to put it into the process memory. I think it should probably be an assign by default. So I'll deal with that here in a moment. Okay, so here I'm going to okay, yeah, so here I can assign challenge. Then I can, this is where I can push the event. This will be handled by the Phoenix JavaScript hook. I think I'm going to move this into a variable. Okay, so don't need the username anymore. That fixes that. I do need to take a look at the at this hook to see if it's actually trying to get the email. So it takes user. Okay, so that's where it has been taking the user's email, but actually we're just going to use the username. And then here, that's what we need. Okay. Let's just see if this is actually working in the browser, and then we'll think about tests. Okay, so what happened there? We had no match to right-hand side value index 44. Oh. I need to see what this params actually looks like. Oh, wait. So I think I know what's going on here. So when you click this button, it doesn't have its own value. Okay, so we do actually need to use the change set data. All right, no function clause matching in LiveShowy web user connect.index handle event 3. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Okay. So now we've got change set dot changes. There we go. Okay. So you can't inspect this. Ooh. Tricky thing here is I'm using LiveViewTest, which doesn't actually, so it's different from some other testing frameworks for Phoenix. Like if you've used Wallaby, it will actually run like a headless Chrome in the background, which is nice and convenient, and Wallaby's pretty cool. But the problem is that you wind up with, like anytime you update Chrome, you have to download Chrome driver from the Chrome driver site. You have to extract it, you have to move it. And that's something that'll catch you off guard. You'll go for weeks, not dealing with updates, and then you forget about that, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. So I would like to avoid testing through Wallaby, especially since I'm using LiveView. I'm not sure how I can test this particular piece, like the whole select your key kind of thing. I may have to kind of fake it so it doesn't, maybe it wouldn't actually submit. Or maybe I have to break these tests up a little bit. So instead of testing the whole flow from like username to register to select the key to challenge to attestation, I think I should I should assert that the socket has a challenge assigned after this. Let's see if we can do that. So render submit. But then it returns the rendered result. I wonder if there's any way to test assigns here. I don't see it. That's interesting. So we could do assert reply. Oh, okay. Well, maybe okay. So live response connected live view process. So then we have a process here. Yeah, what's in this view? Okay, so we have the endpoint, the ID. Okay, so we do have a PID. We have the module. There's some other stuff that seems to be hidden. Am I logging somewhere? No, I'm inspecting here, so I don't need that. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to make so we're going to make it a map. Then also want to inspect what's happening after we render submit. Okay. Okay, so we have the view, which has, so it's a process with a PID. Then down here, render submit returns the updated HTML. I could open the browser. That'd be fun if every time we run a test, it opens the browser. That won't work in CI though. All right, I think like I said a minute ago, I've got to tackle this a little bit more piecemeal. So it's useful to know that there's a PID with that view. But I don't see any functions, at least within the LiveView test module, for like checking assigns, which is kind of what I was thinking about here. There's nothing rendered on the page whenever you trigger that challenge register event. Let's see, so I'm going to do form here. I'm going to do the form selector. I'm going to do user params. I just want to see what the output of this. Like, is it form element HTML? Is it something else? It's something else. It's struct or something, I think. So maybe it's an element. An element struct. So maybe we can do map dot from struct here. Okay. Let's see what happens if we do a render click. We'll do that on the, oh no, it wants the view, not the form element. No, okay, now we can use the arity 3 here, I think, for challenge register. Okay, so we can't use render click after the form. wonder if there's examples of what we can do with a form. We can render submit. Okay, so then we can do render submit. So this would be challenge register. I think it probably wants that third argument. So let's try that. If I'm reading this error correctly, so, there's a private function render event, it's not exposed here. So this is highlighted red, so I think it's not getting a view. Like I think, if I remember correctly, from a few minutes ago, this was actually an element. So it's not the view. And then also the value is coming back is not a map or a list. It is a map. The example in the docs, though, uses render submit with no additional. Okay, let's try making this default to we're going to make it default to challenge register whenever you hit submit on the form. Okay, so it's no longer a struct. This test, so user can see, maybe I need to kind of narrow the scope of this test. So user can create registration challenge if username is not taken. I think that may be as far as this particular test can go. And then I may have to kind of like mock out CWAR keys and that kind of stuff. So this is all going to move elsewhere. Okay, so got that. An unauthenticated user can create registration challenge. if a username is not taken. Is this testing what I think is testing? It's testing that this handle event exists for challenge register, or at least when the form is submitted. I'm gonna go ahead and handle the error, the change set errors if there are any. So this would be a no reply, socket. We would do put flash error. Whew. Okay, so if the change set does have errors, it will put a flash, an error flash. Please address the errors displayed below. So change set errors would be like if the username's too short, or if it's already taken, that will be displayed directly below the username. But actually it should go, it needs to go through needs to go through the user can I just do this? Change set dot validate, or is it I think it's unsafe. Unsafe validate unique. Okay. And then I can say username validates that no existing record with a different primary key has the same values for these fields. I think what I really need is unique constraint. I think that'll work. Okay, so if there are no errors, so what I'm doing here is like the change set, anytime you're making changes in the form, it's automatically going to tell you if the username's too short or too long. But we don't really want to check uniqueness until you go to register, because we don't want to do that every time you hit a keystroke, and we don't need to validate it's a unique username if you're just trying to log in. That doesn't really make sense. So here, whenever you hit the register button, this function handler is going to take the existing change set and also assert that the username is unique. And then I'm handling errors if there are any there. If there are no errors, then if there are no errors, then we generate a challenge from the socket, which will be used to generate challenge params. Which are pushed to the LiveView hook, the JavaScript hook. Wow, it's already 3:30. Okay, and then at least with the browser, it will render that key selection menu. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next test. And this may need a little bit more later. So the next thing I want to test is so what I want to do here is I want to generate like a fake user, like a fake WebAuthn attestation. So what that looks like is it comes back in this shape here, attestation 64, so it's base 64 encoded. There's client data, which is I think a stream, if I remember correctly. It's got to be encrypted or decrypted. Then we've got raw ID, which is also base 64 encoded, and then public key type. So that's the shape of data that I'm going to be mocking here, or faking, or whatever you want to call it. I need maybe a factory for this. How do I describe this particular test? So this test, an unauthenticated user can return an attestation that's good enough for the moment. Okay, so then we're going to copy that live view. I think I will also copy that. Then what happens here is a little bit different. So here is where we would, I think, use render hook. Oh wait, I need to, that's what I knew something was missing from this other test. I haven't made any assertions. So of course it's passing, because there's no like exceptions or errors here. So I think what I have to do, asserts an event will be pushed within timeout. Oh. Okay. Okay, so maybe this I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so let me comment all that out because I think that's going to be replaced with assert push event. The view, the event is challenge register with the payload of user params, which is actually irrelevant. Because I'm not actually taking the params inside the function. The username has not been actually changed here, so form selector, user params. I have a feeling this is not going to work, but you know what? We will find out. So this is now line 53. I think what's kind of bumming me out is that whenever you use these render functions, it renders out the HTML. I mean, it makes sense. I just don't know how I can it'd be really cool to trigger a change and then have the return value of that be the view, if that's even possible. Register string with target. I think assert push event is not actually what I need here either. It kind of sounds like it's listening for the event, not for, I don't know, the description's kind of short. It's hard to really make heads or tails of what exactly assert push event does. All right, I got about 22 minutes to go here. I do have a hard out at 4 o'clock local time. So can I wrap my head around this? Because what I'm doing is a little bit unusual. That's the thing, is that maybe I can't combine these into one thing, which would be kind of a bummer. Here's a key passage from Herman Velasco's Testing LiveView. And this is from the Testing LiveView Hooks lesson, or Testing JavaScript Hooks. So let's see, where do I want to start? So I'll start here. So there's one thing we're doing here that we didn't do before. We're passing an event directly to render hook, the load more event. This is like, so the example he's working through, and I'm not sharing this because I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, but it's he's building a like an infinite scrolling page with JavaScript hooks in LiveView. With render hook arity 3, we have to pass the event name because we're triggering the hook directly from the test. The element that we target with the element ID doesn't know which events will be triggered from JavaScript. It only knows that it'll call the JavaScript hook given by Phoenix-hook. That JavaScript may push 0, 1, or many events, or it may not interact with LiveView at all. That is the downside of testing JavaScript hooks in LiveView. We can only test the Elixir portion of the hook. The last thing we can do in our test is assert that we see the newest and oldest post. So, yeah, I think the tricky thing here is that and the reason I procrastinated on this for a while is that there's no way to kind of make assertions about what the JavaScript is doing with the JavaScript hook events. We can only assert that the LiveView module is pushing events. I don't even see if any functions in here for checking that an event has been received. That would be cool too. Maybe since it's a process, maybe it's possible to do that with some other testing tools. I may have to look into that outside of the LiveView docs. Once we got a little bit more time. So, okay, a little bit of a bummer. So I can only test so much from this piece. So here's another consideration is I've got a proposal pending for ElixirConf at the end of August. So hopefully that will be accepted, and I'll be presenting a talk about implementing WebAuthn over LiveView. This testing piece might be, especially if I can figure it out, that'll be really cool. I'm confident I can find some way to kind of build confidence in this piece. But that's the idea. Is I want to present a talk that is about how the nature of passwords and authentication is currently changing. WebAuthn has been around for a few years, but it's kind of finally picking up steam. There are kind of layers on top of that of WebAuthn. that are being implemented by the browsers. So Android and iOS now, or at least in upcoming versions, will support passkeys. That'll be really cool for making sure that you don't have to. Well, it'll be nice for like registering a key on one device and then being able to use the same key on other devices. Like, so currently, at least, unless I've misconfigured something, I'm not able to like reuse my Touch ID from this laptop on another device. Or like it's not really associated with my Apple account. So yeah, I've got some research to do about the new passkey stuff. Like ideally you would connect, like you would register for your LiveShowy account with your username, and then you would have whatever, public key is created from either your USB key or your, Touch ID, Face ID, whatever it is. That public key would be stored in your credential manager, and then it could be reused on another device without having to register that other device. Like, that'd be really cool. There will definitely be some complexities around like managing that, I'm sure, and like implementing it. I kind of skimmed through the video and some of the documentation about passkeys. So I think there's a little bit more work that I would have to do to support that on the browser here. Because I don't think by default these are being stored in any kind of credential manager. But that should be possible. So yeah, a lot of work to be done. If I don't make progress on testing, so I'll keep hacking away at this over my extended weekend, and maybe between the day job, like after hours, and then so like next week it's possible I may kind of pivot to like drafting slides and like an outline for that talk, or I may pick up where I've left off, or like continue working on the LiveShowy app and implementing this Connect functionality. So yeah, plenty of fun stuff in the future. I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. And if you have enjoyed this, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully you can keep up with me on Twitter. So this is my profile here. I am making progress on LiveShowy. Oh, wait 1 minute. One more thing before I go. It's like a Apple event or something. So I have made the executive decision to share or to make public the repo that I of the application that I built for Big Elixir back in March for my talk at Big Elixir. So I'll show you this here. This is really cool. This will be good last 10-15 minutes of my live stream today. So let's see here. So this is the repo. And so it's the LiveShowy prototype. So this version of LiveShowy was a little bit different from what I'm building now. The thing you've been watching me build for the past month or so is like a web-based version where users from like anywhere can collaborate with each other. Like we'll be dealing with latency. Maybe there are limits on how far apart people can be. But at any rate, that's kind of like the next version. But the prototype I built back in for Big Elixir in March. I started on it back in, I think, right at the end of October, right after, like the first commit was October 26th, if I remember correctly, and that's literally the day that I got back, my first full day back from ElixirConf. There were a bunch of new features and enhancements for LiveView, so that really was, like, I was getting excited about what I was seeing with that, with what I was hearing about Surface, and also some new things happening just in the community and with Elixir itself. So I built this version of the application, the prototype, and This version of LiveShowy was geared towards like dozens or hundreds of people inside the same room. So connected to the same Wi-Fi network. And then the demo, so this is all kind of shortening things a little bit, but look, the demo was I run this version of the application on my laptop, which is connected to the Wi-Fi network. I have an audio application running in the background to take MIDI events and generate sound. So that application, so the audio that's being generated is not from the Elixir or Phoenix app. It's actually being generated in the background from a digital audio workstation called Reaper, and using like plugins and stuff, like virtual instruments. So I gave a talk about this. You can find it on my Twitter profile. I've got a big thread about the work that I did on this. I think that's pinned as well. And then what else? So then once the server's running, so a couple of cool features of this app, of the way I built this, is instead of typical users having a nav bar where they click into different rooms or different pieces of the app, there are 3 or 4 roles. So by default, new users who access the page for the first time get a randomly generated username. And that's just so that we don't have to deal with nastiness, with username spam and that kind of stuff. Because if you're showing usernames on a screen during a talk, you don't want people putting in stuff that goes across the audience and the internet. So fake random generated usernames, and then from the landing page, whenever you are there for the first time, I would be the first user. I would have the stage manager role, and it's like the most powerful role currently in that version of the app. And then I can assign roles to other users. So the other 2 roles were backstage performer and main stage performer. So if you were waiting on the landing page, you would see your username, your roles, if you had any, kind of some generic information, the logo, and that's basically it. You would also see like a user bar with some of that information, like your username, and also a latency monitor. So it would show you like how many milliseconds of latency you were experiencing on your browser connected to my server over Wi-Fi. So the couple people I asked about that during the talk, the one guy said it was 0 or 1 maybe. What's crazy is I ran this whenever I was at Impex, just kind of outside between talks. I ran this connected to 5G on my iPhone through a hotspot on my laptop, or the laptop was connected to the hotspot on my iPhone on 5G. And then the person I was showing it to was also connected to 5G. I ran this over ngrok, and once the page loaded, he was still seeing like maybe, I think it was 0 or 1 milliseconds. It was at least like less than 10, and like response time seemed to be instant. So that was kind of like, how is that possible? I do think latency is actually lower once you're on a WebSocket. It seems to be the case. I want to expand on the very primitive latency monitor that I built for this version of LiveShowy and make sure that I'm really precisely and accurately measuring latency. But anyway, the interesting thing is that instead of navigating, I would, as soon as I would give you a backstage performer role, you would be automatically redirected, live redirected to the backstage. And then from there, you could view the keyboard. You could chat with other users who are backstage. That was all cool. It's all happening in real time. And then if I give you a main stage performer role, you would see a main stage button. You would click that, and then you could let me back up a little bit. If you're in backstage, you would press notes, and you would only hear those sounds through your local machine. It would be kind of this Tone JS style synthesizer, a very primitive kind of sound you would hear locally. And then if you went to the main stage, that's where those MIDI events would be piped out to my machine instead of just your local machine. And those would come out of the PA. So really cool stuff. It was kind of built quick and dirty. Not a lot of tests there. I probably did have some unit tests, but definitely not a lot of integration tests. But yeah, that was a really fun project and got a lot of great feedback. There was some excitement from people in the audience and a lot of fun conversations afterwards. So I had a lot of fun putting this together. And, it came up a few times at the conf whenever I did a preview before the conference, and also a couple times since then. People have been interested about like the code and like how this actually was put together. So I spent a little bit of time, I think yesterday or the day before, updating the README, polishing up the repo just a little bit, but basically just adding disclaimers that this is not really a finished product. It's more like a prototype. And then added some kind of high-level information here about the roles, the areas of the application, and then if you want to even try running this locally, like how you would do that. This is pretty minimal little README here, but I hope everything that's in here makes sense. I do have a discussions tab enabled for this repo. The repo itself is archived, but I think you can still discuss here. Maybe when it's archived, you cannot discuss. That would make sense, right? Yeah, I think once it's archived, the discussion is closed. But I'm happy to discuss this on Twitter. So if you have any questions about this, or you want to hack away at it, I'm definitely interested in any contributions here. I think the interesting stuff that I would point to, if you want to like kind of see what was going on here, I think the most interesting things are going to be around like users. So I use PubSub in most of the context for any kind of create, update, or delete actions. Those are going to generate a message that's going to be broadcast on PubSub. And they're in a fairly standardized format, so they'll be broadcast on a topic, and they're usually tuples with a tag tuple. So you'll have like a user updated, and then it'll have the actual updated user value. And that's really cool because from the Stage Manager live view, I would see a list like that would update in real time of all the users who are on the app, and then I could toggle roles on and off. I could, like if I was toggling them on and off through the IEX shell, they would update in the live view as well, because PubSub was broadcasting those events as well as logging them. So yeah, so a lot of cool stuff there. This is still pretty rudimentary take on PubSub. Like you might actually, and something I'm doing with the new version is instead of broadcasting on a kind of a generic global topic like users, I'm broadcasting you would broadcast to users if there's a user created. But then any changes to the user, like updates, those are going to be broadcast to maybe the user's channel or topic, but also the users, like there'll be like a users : user ID. So like it'll have like that user's actual user ID, and then you'll broadcast messages to that topic. I'm not sure if I want to have both topics being broadcasted to, but it's fine. Phoenix is actually really, really nice for doing stuff like that. What else? And that, by the way, that's one way of solving distribution with Phoenix apps is, and I'm hearing a lot of really interesting conversations about distributed databases with Phoenix apps, especially running on the internet. Some using SQLite, some using Postgres, some using a different database, I think called Clickable DB or something. And yeah, the other thing I think I was going to point out here is, so it uses port MIDI on the background because it needs to get those MIDI messages out to the system so that Reaper, Logic, Pro Tools, or whatever can like respond to those MIDI events. But I don't think I'll be needing port MIDI for the web version at all. Was there anything else here? Yeah, I think that's the last thing I had off the top of my head. So yeah, anyway, if you want to tinker with this thing, try it out. Oh, ETS. I think I was going to talk briefly about ETS. So we were looking at user roles. Is like I try to make data, like typically most data operations fall in the bucket of CRUD, like create, read, update, delete. So I use that as my kind of general purpose mental framework for building up access to objects within an application. And sometimes I adjust the verbs just slightly depending on the context of whatever I'm doing. So like for user roles, we have add, we have set, we have remove, and we have get and check. So those are also broadcast so that the stage manager can, and this is what actually enables the user to be redirected in real time from one view to another whenever they receive a specific role. So that's really cool. But we have, if you look at these modules, like the user roles uses an ETS table, which is a bag. And then if you look at the users table, it's an ETS table as well, but it's a set, which is the default option there. What's really cool is shared MIDI state. So because this version of the app was like everyone connecting to one machine to like view or interact with the performance, it turns out that I needed a kind of like a global MIDI map. So like if you look at a big full 88 key keyboard, think of like each of those keys has a number, and it can have a state of being like active or inactive or like pressed or not pressed. Anyway, so the way I built this is I have it's actually a counter. So for each key, it has a counter of like how many people are playing that note. This was important. So this is something I learned from the preview that I did leading up to Big Elixir. The challenge was like if you had, so before I did this, before I built this shared MIDI state table, if two people pressed the same note, the note would stop as soon as one of them let go. And so that kind of felt buggy. Like if two people are pressing a note, like in the real world, you wouldn't actually let go of the note until both people have let go of the note. So that's all this module does, or this table, is it counts how many people are pressing a given note. And then once that note is down to 0 presses, it will broadcast a message to port MIDI to send a release event. And then if it receives updates that the note is being pressed and the integer is 1 or higher, well, it will write a note on message to port MIDI whenever the first person presses the key, and then it only releases whenever the last person releases the key. That's the shorter, more efficient way of explaining it. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff here. Again, take a look at LiveShowy. It's on GitHub. Just go to the organization is LiveShowy, no underscore, and then the repo is live_showy_prototype. The other stuff is private repos, just because, kind of debating what I want the future to be for this upcoming version. So anyway, thanks again if you've stuck around, and or even if you're watching this in the future. You can find me on Twitter at Owen Bickford, and I really need to update this card here so that it says my GitHub is LiveShowy. There we go. There we go. So now I will be back next Sunday. I'm scheduling these so far for Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you enjoyed this, I hope you did. Catch you next week. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Bye.